Happy Saturday, y'all. Y'all, I'm coming on real quick because I wanted to share something with you guys that I think is very interesting. This is a dream interpretation, intrigue, entertainment, inspiration. So I wanted to share with you guys what I had experienced last night or in the twilight under my unisom. Y'all still got a few more, or fru, I like to say it in the country way, fru more gel caps of unisom I bought with me when I departed the States in 2021. So I still have just a fru left. So I take them very, very seriously and very sparingly, and under the auspices of the energy of the Sphinx and the Giza pyramids, I'm sitting at the foothills of them. I think it's very powerful for me to share with you some of the dreams that I've been having. More potent, more than anything, so potent. So I won't get into the ritual that I do when I'm getting ready to have a unisom-induced dream space, okay? But I will share the potency of it, okay? So last night, I had a vision quest or experience where I was around these individuals, and I don't know, they were seaside dwellers, okay, or oceanside dwellers, and specifically the Atlantic Ocean. I don't know if it was like West Coast Africa or if it was like East Coast, the North America or South America. Okay. So in this particular dream, I was taking a bus ride, like a charter bus ride. So for instance, okay, it was it gave me the vibe of, I don't know, it's something about Brazil that I keep getting these energies going on. I don't know what it is. But when we were in Brazil back in 2017, we took a charter bus from Asunción, Paraguay to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. And on the way there, actually we stopped at our final destination was in the final a town called Paraty, in the state of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. But on our way there, we stopped along this route, or we were along this route. It was at nighttime, y'all. It was so beautiful, and it was like the first week in October. And so it was just so beautiful. I can't get over how beautiful the sunrise was. It was like being like the African sunrise, or like the African sunset in the bush. That's very equivalent to the Brazilian sunrise, okay, to me. And the moon, it was a full moon. And so I remember how it was nighttime, and on that bus, we were riding along what was the Atlantic Ocean, right? And when I say very close, I mean it was so close that the waves were, and it's a full moon, so you know the full moon has an effect on the sea and the oceans, right? So the full moon waves were casting and hitting along the bus while we were along the road, or driving along the road in that charter bus. It was just so magical and beautiful, y'all. I can't get over it. And there's a couple of other things that I remember specifically. It was as if I saw two beams of light, like the movie theater, or marquee lights that they have flashing in the sky. At times you can see, kind of, let you know how close something is. Well, this is what was like. But I knew it was no like ships way out in sea doing that, because I saw the same beams of light again once we made it to our destination in Paraty, which was, at least a good 3-hour drive away from where we were in the major city of Rio de Janeiro. Okay, so I'm saying all that to say this: the dream I had last night was very similar to the vibes of being on that bus, as well as having a conversation with individuals about, specifically, I caught myself and I heard myself speaking about how Earth was and how Earth is now in comparison. And so for those of you who may not be esoterically astute or metaphysically astute in some cases. This is going to sound way out to you, but I have had this confirmed, and if you study some of the aspects of what Edgar Cayce's teachings was, these are things that I was able to channel on my own and be able to get confirmation from other sources outside and inside and metaphysically and esoterically and energetically and kinetically of what I'm about to say. So there was a time before Earth was 75% water and 25% land. It was actually 75% land and it was only 25% water. And the source of water always came from underneath or inside the Earth, okay? And this is when it was also more a silica base. There was a time when Earth was silica based and not carbon based, okay? Now it's carbon based. Okay, so when it was 75% land and 25% water, what that mean was those who play Minecraft may know what I'm about to say when I'm speaking of this imagination or in this space of what was. So when the Earth was 75% Earth and 25% water, there were pillars that were made of quartz, crystal, and a few other type of precious stones that we call today. They were pillars, and they extended all the way in high into the sky. Sometimes they would soar into the sky hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of feet up into the kilograms, maybe like kilometers, I should say, like a mile into the Earth spheres. Okay, so if you look at the so-called virus they call corona, look at the makeup of that particular, the physical look of that particular virus. That's exactly what Earth used to look like. Okay, but with the poles were made of precious stones, crystals, that we consider today. So if you want to do your studies on the crystal caves and how once they were explored or so-called discovered, they were submerged in water, okay? That's one of the after effects of why Earth is now. Once those pillars fell, because one of the jobs of those pillars, the crystals pillars that I'm speaking about, when it was silica-based environment and not carbon-based as it is now, was to transmute the waters from the ground, and the water would rise up along the actual the pole itself, and it will go all the way into the atmosphere, the stratosphere, and the ionospheres, and the other spheres that's on Earth. I'm not trying to get all too scientific. I'm just trying to give you the understanding of what the scape was back then, okay? And to get understanding, this is how the Earth was able to maintain its moisture, as well as the powers of crystals themselves, and the water in conduciveness, the water conducing itself all around the polars in a spiral position. They would transduct and I hope that's the right word, they would transduct the water from the ground all the way up until they got to the top of the pillar themselves, and then they would transfer to the next pillar and the next pillar and the next pillar and the next pillar. And it was kind of like a connective web, if you will, but that is how the Earth sustained itself. It was self-moisturizing, and the dwellers, the beings on Earth, also was able to sustain themselves from that also, because that's how water also was keeping the Earth dwellers hydrated, moisturized also. And we also did not require so much consumption from the ground, therefore. So it was not much in so-called vegetation that we had to consume, because we had natural effects of nourishment from the environment and the atmospheres and the polar constructs themselves. Okay. which if you look at and if you hear how they say the North Pole and the South Pole, okay, those are invisible remnants of what was at a point in time. So you had all kinds of poles. It wasn't just the North Pole and the South Pole. It was poles all over. And that's why the Earth used to look the way it looked, similar to that of what I said, the virus that they call corona. Okay? All right. So I'll also say this also. What is considered the equator line, because there were rings. Okay, so what helped those bands is the northern and southern hemisphere, the eastern and what we call those hemispheres now, were actually rings at one point in time. Which is why, in some cases, what you call the latitude and the longitude, as well as the equators, those were all physical rings that help keep the unison and the tandemness of the poles that were around the Earth at that point in time together. When the poles fell is when the oceans began, and that's how it went from 75% land to 25% land, and 75% or 25% water to 75% water, if that makes sense at all. There's lots of research that is out there. Google can be your friend, and I'm not talking about Google and people just putting bullshit out there. I mean scientifically proven elements of what I just said, okay? And just do your research, okay? Geographically speaking, Florida, so I'm saying all that to say also because this is around the time the Atlantis and Lemuria were one. And also, this is an explanation of what the Mariana Trench is also, because the dwellers who are in the so-called ocean and the seas now they adjusted, they adapted, okay? Once the Atlantean civilization failed, okay? And so the reason why I was bringing it up, all of this is because in the dream, I was able to speak to the individual on that bus ride at night about, I said, it's so good to see you, Atlantic Ocean. It's so beautiful to see you. And what I was really saying is when you have the ocean, you have the world at your feet, right? That's always been my motto. So I was speaking to Atlantis. I said, it's so good to see you again, because I remember the fall. I was one of the ones who was maintaining the pillars at that time, one of the pillars. There were many. And so that's why I really feel like in a distinct way in this so-called incarnation, I'm a life path number 11, because it's a representation of the pillars and the poles that once stood at the earth. It's not insignificant now. It's definitely still representative of the energies that still exist, because you still have the latitudes and the longitudes. Okay, so there, you still have to go through those gateways. You still have to go through those pillars. Y'all excuse whatever the hell that noise is they doing outside. I don't know. But at any rate, so the person that I was speaking to was not even processing anything that I was saying about what I just mentioned to you all, because that's exactly what I explained in the dream to this individual, right? Okay, but there was someone who was processing everything that I was saying, but they were an individual who was not supposed to be listening. Okay, the reason why I was speaking that information to the individual that I was speaking to in the vision and in the dream is because it was to arouse their memory, to let them know they were once part of that reality also, but they weren't processing it. But the individual who was not part of that realization or reality, they were processing it, but they weren't processing it to the fullest as, say, an activation, online activation, or a DNA activation for, say, the individual I was speaking to, or for me myself, who was part of that civilization at that time. And it definitely has a lot of Atlantean and Lemurian cohesiveness in those experiences. And when Atlantis was, it still is, but it's, again, submerged, it's adapted, and it's in many layers and many dimensions at this point in time. But in just the physical aspect, this is what I'm speaking about. Okay, y'all, that was the dream. That was the experience. So I'm going to go channel somewhere else, and this was Egyptian magic. And I hope that you were inspired, intrigued, entertained, enlightened. And yeah, all right, y'all. Peace.